So the gear page is a pretty polarizing place. People like to go there to talk about and argue about gear and the minutia of the differences. A lot of people don't like the place. I like it. I tend to ignore the BS and pull useful nuggets of information from some of the more knowledgeable users. What I'm going to talk to you about today is a guy named James Freeman. James, you're awesome if you're watching this. There's a discussion in one of the Helix threads talking about how overhyped some amp models can be in other modeling platforms, and our friend James very scientifically measured signals going into and out of different models and amps, and he knows tons about things. And he gave this really interesting tip on how to tighten up some of these high gain amps to make them sound a little more hyped. Some people really like that kind of sound. So let's see what happens when we apply this little method here. So he's calling for 2 low shelf cuts at 400, volume bump before the high gain amp, and a low shelf boost at 150 after the amp until your monitors beg for mercy. Low master, hum, ripple, and sag. Let's look at our first EQ. We've got a low high shelf, minus 12 at 400 hertz, then minus 12 at 3.5 kilohertz. Then he goes on to say that he cuts 24 decibels at 3.5 kilohertz. So we've got that 3.5 kilohertz, minus 12 on one of these EQs, and on the other EQ we've got our other low frequency cut, high frequency cut, and now we're boosting 12 decibels. So these are the same block except for the 12 decibel boost. And then after, he calls for a shelving EQ to bump up 150 and below, but I'm going to do it a little more surgically. I don't want to bump those super lows. I'm just going to bump up 136 in the surrounding frequencies. If you're not quite sure how to use a parametric EQ, I've got a video for that if you want to check it out. Pre and post EQ can be a really powerful thing. When you pre-EQ the amplifier, you're changing the sound of the input. So you're changing the distortion character, the feel, the response of the amp. And when you add an EQ to the end of the amp or post amp, you alter the sound of the amp, not so much the distortion characteristic or the feel. Yes, it changes the response and the feel of the speaker in the room, but not so much the way the amp reacts. Got my QSC K8.2 in the room so I can feel it. So we got Cali rectifier. It's kind of loose and flubby, a little grainy. Let's go ahead and add the pre-EQ and the boost. Really tightens it up, focuses it. So now if I want to give it more oomph, I give it the post EQ, and I'm only bumping it by 3.5 decibels. He's saying, go, the sky's the limit. That's a little too much for me. I don't need all that. Sounds pretty good. I'm going to try a different amp model. Let's take all the EQs out. turn that bass bump down. That's just too much for me. I don't need all that. Pretty frickin' mean and tight. Let's try a different amp. The Mahadiva. This one's got a lot of low mids. Not a big fan of it. Alright, let's turn up the hype knob. We'll turn the sag down, the hum down, ripple down. We need more treble. That sounds pretty sick. All right, another amp. The Doom. This one's nice and hairy and thick. That's what she said. Sounds pretty good. Oh, let's do the 2204 mod. It's pretty tight. Placate or dirty. Look, everything's pretty low. So that's cool, huh? Try it for yourself, see if you like it. Thanks, James.